Mario Kart 64, the second game in the Mario Kart series, and the first to make the jump into 3D. Some people argue that it still holds up today, and even claim that it's one of, if not the best in the series. However, does Mario Kart 64 hold up, or is it just an outdated and overrated relic? With each new Mario Kart, a new feature is usually introduced that changes the mechanics of the game. Mario Kart 64 introduced the Power Slide, which makes it easy to turn around corners and provides a mini turbo boost when executed correctly. However, the Power Slide in Mario Kart 64 doesn't feel like it does anything. There's just no tactile response. Sure, the characters make a noise when you successfully charge the mini turbo like in Double Dash and Mario Kart Wii. However, unlike the later games, in Mario Kart 64 you can't see the car accelerating, and there are no flames shooting out of your car's exhaust to show that your kart is gaining speed. Because of this, every time I did the mini turbo, I didn't notice the car going any faster, so I honestly couldn't tell if the mini turbo was doing anything at all. Control-wise, Mario Kart 64 controls pretty much like any other Mario Kart game. There is, however, one glaring difference between 64 and the others though, and that is how shitty the handling is. On lower engine classes, you probably won't notice it as much, but in higher engine classes, the karts are ridiculously loose, making it hard to turn sharp corners, even if you use the Power Slide. On most levels it isn't an issue considering how wide the tracks are, but on smaller levels like Banshee Boardwalk, it's really annoying to constantly bounce off the walls while the CPU just slides by. When playing this game, I felt like items didn't do anything. Several times I would get a mushroom or a golden mushroom, and I would never get that far ahead of the computer players, which was ridiculous. In Double Dash and Wii, getting a mushroom meant that you could really pull ahead of the competition if you used them strategically, which just doesn't happen in this game. There's also the fact that hitting the computer with bananas or shells didn't seem to faze them at all. I mean, what's the point of having items if they don't do anything? One thing I noticed was that not all items could be thrown behind you. Triple shells and red shells could only be thrown forward, which kinda sucked because I didn't want to run the risk of throwing the shells and having them bounce off walls and hit me, so I ended up hanging onto them. Of course, this isn't that big of an issue, and was most likely due to how old the game is, but it was still annoying to have to hold on to items without being able to use them. A minor point of contention I have with this game is that there are only 8 playable characters. I like having the option to choose among a larger pool of characters like in the later Mario Kart games. I also like having the option of choosing a different kart to fit my playstyle, as everyone pretty much had the same kart, and only your character choice affected the attributes of your kart. One thing that surprised me was that the character classes aren't the same as they are now. For example, I was under the assumption that light characters had higher acceleration and heavy characters had higher speed, and the medium characters were a balance of both. Well, as I quickly found out, this is not the case in Mario Kart 64. Instead, light characters have high acceleration and speed, whereas heavy characters have lower acceleration and speed, and medium characters are balanced. So if that's the case, what's the advantage of using heavy characters? Well, there really isn't one. It's true that heavy characters have an easier time knocking out and flattening smaller characters, but that's really only useful if you can even catch up to the smaller characters, or in battle mode. I'm not usually one to be overtly critical of the graphics of a game, because I believe that as long as the graphics don't hinder the gameplay at all, I can look past the jagged shapes and muddy set pieces. However, for some reason, I found Mario Kart 64 to be so offensively ugly that I really couldn't stand playing it. I mean, look at these stages. There's Shit Mountain and Wario Shit Stadium, and Banshee Boardwalk is so goddamn dark, it's sometimes hard to see where the fuck you're going. Not only that, Mario Kart 64's Rainbow Road is the longest and most disappointing in the series. It's completely fenced in and takes around 5 minutes depending on what engine class you choose. Not only that, but the only hazard are chain chomps that move around the board. However, they have a predictable movement cycle and are easy to dodge. Now there's one thing I have a huge problem with in this game, and that is the computer players. I know it's common for people to gripe about how unfair the computer players are when they are doing poorly in a game, but I honestly think that the computer players have an unfair advantage in Mario Kart 64. Unlike Mario Kart Wii and Double Dash, where the computer's difficulty is set up based upon the engine class, with lower engine classes having easier computer racers, Mario Kart 64 has a 2 rival system. Basically, 2 randomly selected rivals will fight against the player, and will use the handicap feature to put themselves on the same level as the player. Also, when playing the 150cc in Extra mode, 2 random CPU racers may receive a huge handicap, making it so that they will have a faster recovery if they are hit with an item. So what does this mean? Well, basically it means that the computer players tend to have an unfair advantage over you. Attacks from items don't affect them as much as they do you, and in some instances the computer players can gain incredibly huge leads, where it's impossible to catch up to them. And then of course the computer players are always on your ass. Even if you don't get hit by items, and if you use power slides effectively, most of the time you'll never be able to get more than a 3-second lead over the computer. I mean, what's the point of being a technically proficient racer if it doesn't matter? Of course, some people might like always having to fend off the CPU racers, but what I like about the other Mario Kart games is being able to get a huge lead over the other racers. That way, if I fuck up, I don't have to worry about losing my place and having to fight my way back up to first, which might not even be possible if the game decides to give the computer a huge handicap. Now obviously some people might say that the multiplayer is the best part of the game, and you're probably right. That being said, I really don't have any experience with this game's multiplayer at all, so I really can't say for a fact that it's any good. For all I know, it's just as bad as the single player. However, even if the multiplayer is this game's strong point, I don't think that's good enough to whitewash how bad the single player is. So is this game overrated? Yeah, I'd say it is compared to the other Mario Kart games. Quite frankly, this game looks like shit, sounds like shit, feels like shit, and I'm sure if you could smell things through your TV, it would smell like shit too. I know I'm being overtly critical of the game, but honestly mostly every other Mario Kart is better than Mario Kart 64 in terms of gameplay, controls, and selection of characters and cards. I don't deny the fact that some people might have fun playing this game when they were younger. Hell, I'm sure if some people played it now, they'd still have fun. But just because you had fun with the game doesn't mean it's good on a technical level. For me, Mario Kart 64 wouldn't even be in my top 10 Mario Kart games list. And yes, I'm well aware there are only 7 main series Mario Kart games. But I just feel that this game just doesn't hold up as well as the other games in the Mario Kart series. Of course, that doesn't mean that the other games aren't without their own problems, but I can still pick up Double Dash and have a reasonably good time, and I can play the Wii version and still have fun. But whenever I play Mario Kart 64, it always feels outdated.